was doing it again. Hold on. That's weird. Why is he even defaulting that camera? That's amazing. Well, welcome everybody to Bother the Father. We are here. Sorry, the camera is actually in a different position. It's actually the camera in the office. Couldn't edit it for some reason. Well, welcome. So we're here live. If you have any questions, this is Bob the Father. This is an open discussion on whatever topic that you would prefer. So let's go ahead and get started. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, Father.
Yeah.
So the readings and Sundays Mass,
Mhm.
I literally had to read 4 times to figure out what was going on, because there's a lot of them and they, and I'm not sure who was happy, who was sad. Like somebody was impressed, but I didn't see why they would be impressed. And so the person he says, "How much do you owe my master?" And they're like 100 shares of olive oil.
Yeah. Yeah, good. I mean, so yeah, we look at this passage that we had this last weekend about the dishonest steward.
Yes.
Right? That's the parable of the dishonest steward. And as we recall, there's this steward that he displeases his master because he's dishonest. And his master says, "Well, make an account of everything that you've done, because now you're not my steward. I just want to make sure that see how much I'm actually got, swindled out of. So you're going to have to put that account and let me know what you did." And so the steward gets very scared. He's like, "Whoa, man, this is not great, because I am too old to actually go out and start begging for people. And I'm too ashamed to actually beg for anything.
I can't work.
Right. Yeah. So I can't do these 2 things. And these are the only things I probably can do in this circumstance, because I'm dishonest and my master is going to be mad at me. I can't also get into anyone else's house, right? They're not going to welcome me in." So he says, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to call my debtors in, and we're going to have a conversation." And he says, "Okay, how much you owe?" And he says, "Well, I owe 100, vials of wine or of oil." "Okay, give me 80 or 50. Oh, okay. Okay, you, how much you owe?" "I owe 100 cores of wheat." 100 cores of wheat. "Okay, well, give me 80 of those." Okay, so now here's the thing, right? Okay, yeah, you're giving the master's debtors a break, but aren't you hurting your master?
Absolutely.
Because here's the thing, right? Your master still has to give you a good think about it this way. You're in the sales business.
Well, so it cleared everything up, because I thought he was trying to do these things to get back in the master's house. No, he was trying to have something a go-to place.
But here's the thing, though, right? His master still has to give him a letter of good standing, or kind of recommend him.
Yeah.
I mean, so you could say, well, maybe that wouldn't necessarily be necessary, but let's maybe put it in more colloquial terms. You're in sales.
Yep.
You get a commission, I imagine,
Yep.
for every sale you make.
Yep.
Okay, that's very similar to what's going on here. What this guy is doing, he's not actually taking anything away from his master, because the debtor actually owes only 50 vials of oil and only 80 cores of wheat to the master. This additional one that he's taken off is his own commission. Because back then in the time of Christ, right, it was very common for a steward to add on for his own commission, for his own use, his own selling, whatever, because he's putting the time and effort representing his master.
Okay.
So what he's really doing there is not cheating his master, but he's also just helping out the debtors. He's just taking his commission away. He's sacrificing that for his future good. Okay, in this way, I'm helping my master getting everything's due to him, and I'm actually making it easy for these debtors so they may welcome me in their own house.
Yeah.
Right? But the point of that story is that the steward is still dishonest, right? He's still not trustworthy, but he's very prudent in this regard. So what the Lord's trying to really point out is that prudence and faith and trust should go together. And so then he kind of goes into this more of a moral standpoint and said, well, if you're not going to be trusted with dishonest wealth, or otherwise, if you're not going to be a good steward of the wealth that you're given that's not really yours, well, what are you going to do with the stuff that is yours? you're probably going to squander that too, right?
Yeah.
And so the point of that story is that, yeah, we're called to be prudent. That is a virtue, but that doesn't conflict with charity and faith. That the virtues grow together. They're not against each other. That even though this steward's dishonest, he still was prudent. And in that regard, you could say he still exhibits a virtue. But that's not to be contradictory to each other. It's actually meant to flow together, right? That's why you can't serve God and mammon. You have to serve one or the other. Right.
Yeah.
So no, the story is very, a lot of people I think get that little cross because they're like, wait a minute here. Yeah, I can see how he's going to helping out the debtor, but like, doesn't the master still have to like kind of like give him a reference or like provide for like some kind of letter of good standing or and isn't he now he's being cheated though? Well, no, the guy's just taking his commission off.
Okay.
So whatever.
And then the master would be like, well, that kind of impressed me.
Yeah.
You're still out of here. But
I mean, again,
pretty smart.
If anything, is say like, even though you're dishonest, hey, that's at least you're showing you can sacrifice.
Right.
Oh, hey, that's good. So, hey, whatever. Yeah, fine, whatever. Yeah, no, I mean, it can be kind of confusing in modern eyes because we're looking at that and saying, well, wait a minute, how are you showing prudence there? Because you're screwing somebody over.
Mm-hmm.
No, you sacrifice your own commission. That's what it comes down to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it can be a very different. A lot of those parables is more helpful to maybe put into more modern terms or modern situations because, because here's the thing, how many people actually have stewards these days? Or maybe even like more, if you had a rich person, maybe they might have a butler that maybe do these type of things. But I mean, that's sort of again, this idea of a steward is rather foreign to modern ears.
Yeah.
It'd probably be more like in line with like a servant, slave. Typically, stewards tend to be slaves. They weren't like, free people, but also a steward was someone that would show some sort of acuity towards something. And because of that, they would be put in charge of certain things. And that also came with this understanding that like, yeah, you can charge more and get yourself your own stuff so you can provide for yourself. That was sort of a customary thing that was done at the time of Jesus. And we see that today in people who take commissions for their particular services or whatever it may be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agencies and things like that.
Right. I mean, maybe even put in more modern terms, like, if you go like DoorDash or Amazon, typically it'd be like a fee, a delivery fee.
Right.
But if let's say a driver is kind of like, screwing up and they're like, oh, they may say, no, take off the delivery fee. Take off, it's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I'll do this one pro bono.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You're fine.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, it does. I mean, but again,
Well,
sometimes the language betrays.
I didn't know what houses he was trying to get back into, like his master's family's homes. But no, it was the people he was getting to break to.
In some ways, it was both and, right? I mean, it was both and. Is that, we're not really told what happened there after the end. I mean,
he wanted to be in good graces.
Look, is the apostle master like, oh, maybe I should reconsider. If you're willing to sacrifice this, then maybe I can maybe put you in charge of something else. Maybe you got demoted. I don't know. But, again, that's why the parable typically is open, because you make your own conclusion.
Yeah.
Because, in this regard, he's really ingratiating himself in both houses or these multiple houses. And so in some ways there's a prudence there. Now you kind of have your pick. If your master takes you back, you can do that. But maybe you can also negotiate for a better position in another house That's where prudence means right judgment, right? It's actually, it's an act of the intellect. It's a high functioning aspect that is a virtue that's particular to humanity. And so in that regard, we say it definitely is a virtue because it flows from our intellect. But all the virtues don't conflict. So prudence can be used for good or evil. I can use my prudence to do wicked things and evil things. In that regard, that wouldn't be properly prudence. It may be plotting.
Calculating.
Yeah, well, calculating, I mean plotting, or maybe like a false prudence. I mean, so it's really, prudence should always be directed towards the good. But there's maybe a difference also between natural prudence and supernatural prudence, right? Because proper prudence is always directed towards God, doing things in right judgment with the moral aspect in mind. So, I mean, in this regard, you could say it would also be prudent for the servant to say, yeah, I screwed up. I should probably be punished for this, for what I've done. And in that case, I should take my licks and just kind of bear it. There's a prudence involved with that too. And he would say that may be even a high imprudence because also there's humility involved with that. And even an aspect of justice.
Self-justice.
Correct. But in the same regard, you can't say that it wasn't prudence for him to do this other action because that did and lead to a good, more properly speaking, his life situation.
Yeah. Without hurting other people. Without being
Sure.
a cost to other
Sure.
people.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it'd be a different situation if that dishonesty in this particular instance flowed out into his action, meaning, okay, well, instead of maybe taking 50 off, I still want a little bit of grease here, so maybe I'll only take 20.
Right.
So I'm still, so in that regard, I'm still getting something out of this.
Skimming.
Right, getting my commission. My master's getting what's owed, and also I'm helping out the debtor. Is that more prudent? Well, maybe. But the master would still see, like, well, geez, you're still taking commission. I mean, is that really much of a sacrifice? I mean, you're still getting, you could argue, well, yeah, but I have to worry about my situation, right? If I'm not going to be kicked out of your house, well, I can't beg and I can't dig, so I should have something I can maybe sell and grow and do something. But in regard to the rest of the virtues, is that really the most virtuous thing?
Yeah. You're still looking out for yourself,
right?
Which
right
was the root of the cause.
Correct. Exactly. That then would be because you're self-oriented in that regard. Yeah. And you could say in any situation he really still would be. And that's why intention really does matter in these circumstances, even with prudence. Like if I'm intending to do good, well, that's probably prudence. If I'm intending to do bad, that may be a malicious prudence, which is self-centered. And so in that regard, you're really using the virtue you're exhibiting as pride or greed or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, this is a very deep passage we had this last week. Actually, the one we have this week, I think, is even more deep. The passage we're going to hear on this Sunday, which also is interesting because we're transferring the feast of St. Vincent de Paul to this Sunday because he is a secondary patron of the Archdiocese of St. Louis. So the prayers will be for St. Vincent de Paul. The readings will be from the proper Sunday, which is the 26th Sunday of Ordinary Time. But that particular reading is actually about the rich man and Lazarus. So we may recall that there's this rich man, we're told, another parable by Jesus, that there's a rich man that dined sumptuously and dressed in fine linen and purple and whatever. And has this poor beggar at his door whose name is Lazarus. And we're told that he's so poor that even the dogs would come and lick his wounds. Now there's something about that, actually. So dogs are considered filthy animals, right? Especially in the Hebrew position. I mean, the only thing lower than a dog would be a swine. And so if you're hanging out with the dogs, that means you're not clean. You're not in a good stand. Right, exactly. To that same regard, even the licking of the sores is something like also you're not being cared for. Nobody cares about you, right? You're kind of left to fend for yourself. And the fact you're letting these dogs lick your sores is not only maybe relief for you, but also you maybe not be weak. You may be too weak to actually defend them off.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of different aspects of this. So of course they were told that Lazarus dies and he's taken to the bosom of Abraham, and this rich man dies. He's taken to the underworld, right, where he's in torment, and he sees Abraham with Lazarus at his side very far off and says, "Oh, Father Abraham, send Lazarus to come and dip his finger in some cool water to cool my tongue.
Put it on my tongue.
Because I'm in torment here." And then, of course, Abraham says, "Well, my child, remember, you were given what was good in your life, while Lazarus was given what was bad. But also, hey, there's this huge chasm that we can't cross. You can't come over here. We can't go over there. It's impossible to cross." And he says, "Okay, well, then send Lazarus to my brothers. I have 5 brothers, and I don't want them to end up here." And he says, "Well, they have Moses and the prophets." And they said, "Well, no, they're not going to listen to them, And so Abraham just says, "Well, if they're not going to listen to the Moses prophets, they're not going to listen to someone raised from the dead. Now, of course, that's a foreshadowing to Christ, right? And in some ways, that end is sort of a relationship to what we see today, right? That, hey, we did have one from the dead and told us that all this stuff is true, and we saw people who don't believe. That's really interesting, So in many ways, the prophecy of Christ came true in that. But this figure of the rich man is interesting. There's some definite correlations there that we want to pay attention to. For instance, we're not told the name of the rich man. In some ways, that's actually very telling because names have meaning. Name gives identity, name gives purpose, name gives authority, and also names gives relationship. So the tradition has called this man Divites. Now, Divites is a Latin term which means rich. So that's all we know about this guy. That's his whole identity. That's his whole relationship. That's who he is. Rich, 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 rich. Whereas Lazarus has a name. He has an identity that's found in God, that is elevated, that gives him dignity. And where the rich man didn't give him dignity in life, now that the roles are reversed. But also, it's interesting that even in the afterlife, this rich man thinks he has some authority over Lazarus.
I didn't even pick up on
right?
that.
Yeah, well, send the peasant, send the guy to go do some tongue. I need some service here.
Yeah.
Okay, well, go send my brothers. Well, who are you? You don't even have a name. You don't even have an identity. You don't have a relationship. Your dignity is less than this guy, actually, who does. But even like this aspect, the fact that the rich man knew his name, which meant that he did have a relationship with Lazarus. If anything, he stepped over him as he walked out his door and came back in every day. And that means they would have at least had a conversation or some like, who are you? So the fact he knew his name maintained a relationship with him that also required him to give that man dignity, to give that man what he needs. And that's where the failure was on the part of the rich man. That even though he knew this person had dignity, knew this person had an identity, knew this person had a name, and deserved that respect and that dignity that everyone should give them, he didn't. Now, it's also interesting that there's a relationship between this Lazarus, who is a poor man, and the Lazarus who was resurrected by Jesus in the Gospel of John. Namely, that there's a role reversal there too. Lazarus himself was a rich man. But Lazarus was also a dignified rich man who would evidently...
Martha and Mary
Lazarus, right, yeah.
They were
wealthy.
They were wealthy.
But Lazarus has that dignity. Apparently he used his wealth for good.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows a couple things. First off, well, the resurrection of the dead, but also that even though rich man can still do good things and use their means for upholding dignity. It's also pointed out that, right, this aspect of the roles reversal of the effects of these things, right? So the effect of true death, right? So it was pointed out that this parable is directed towards the Pharisees, right? These Pharisees who you would hope that through this parable would learn their lesson and understand that we need to treat everyone with dignity and respect. But with the story of Lazarus, what's rather interesting is that after Lazarus was raised from the dead, the reaction of the Pharisees wasn't, oh, wow, what a wonderful thing. We should actually convert and understand and grow in our virtue and try to do these good things. It was, well, we got to kill him.
Absolutely.
His actually making him this Jesus guy more famous.
This is
and actually business. Exactly. Well, now we have to kill Jesus. We got to kill Lazarus. We got to diminish his dignity, right? So yeah, there's a lot of depth in the parable that we're going to hear this weekend. But maybe I ruined everyone's homily this week, so we'll see what happens. But that's fine. Whatever.
That's fine.
So good. Yeah. Well, good. Looks like we have one person online. If anyone has any question, you can type it into the chat, or they can join us in the Google Meet. But otherwise, if there is no other questions, we can call tonight. Unless there are some questions. Either way.
I'm good.
Okay, anybody watching online have any questions? We are here. as you watch the live feed of The Office.
The Office.
Okay, quick one night. That's cool. That's fine. That gives me some more time off.
Wow.
So, have a good night, everyone. We'll see you next week. Next week still will be Bother the Father because it is the 30th.
Last.
It is the last Tuesday of the month. So you can join us there, either here in the dining room or online. Have any questions, you can bring them up in the chat, put them in the comments. Oh, you're welcome, Mike. It says, thank you for another good meeting. You're very welcome. So we'll see you next week, if not sooner. And also, I think we said for Friends, Food, and Faith in October, we're going to talk about some Marian aspect or even the Rosary, because I think the Feast of the Holy Rosary is actually the night we're going to do it. So I think we're going to talk about that. So hopefully see you there. God bless.